welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Danielle and hello to everyone who is returning. In today's video, I will be sharing 5 DIYs with you that I recently worked on, and they all turned out so beautifully, so I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. If you, like me, love high-end decor pieces but do not love the price tag, this video is definitely for you. All of the DIYs are easy and affordable, and I hope that you are inspired to recreate them on your own. If possible, I will leave the links to some of the items and supplies that I use so that you will be able to purchase them yourself. The DIYs that I am going to share with you today are 2 vintage inspired vases. I worked on a beautiful sculptural papier-mâché bowl, a playful scalloped stool, and I also recreated an art piece that I saw on the June Leloy website. So I hope that you are inspired. Let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. Let's get started. So the first items that I'm going to DIY are vintage inspired rice jars. True vintage ones can range in price. I've seen some as low as $80 and some for a few $100s. What I love the most is that each are unique and have their own special character. If you remember from a few videos ago, I picked up a couple of vases that were very similar to the authentic vintage rice jars. They just need a little DIY. The small black one is just $20 and the large one is $30. Such a steal compared to the authentic ones. I picked up both size vases and I'm going to DIY the large one first. I am going to use a few supplies to paint and blend colors together to give some dimension and texture throughout. Most have these horizontal lines going across, so I am also going to add these lines as well. To create those horizontal lines, I am first going to use the yarn to draw a few lines around the vase. First, I wrap the yarn around and tie a knot. Once it was where I wanted it to be, I used a pencil to trace a few lines. I used a pencil because just in case I needed to erase anything and fix the lines, it was easy to do so. To create those creases or lines, I am going to use this clear silicone sealant. It does not drip when applied and has really strong adhesion and is paintable, which is exactly what I need. I did consider using a glue gun, but that would have made a thicker line than I wanted, and since this sealant has a better long-lasting hold that won't chip, this is what I decided to use. I let this dry overnight, and the following day I began painting. The colors that I'm going to use are white, burnt umber, and cinnamon stick. I began by using cinnamon stick as a base and covered the entire vase with this color. The original color is okay, but I wanted it to be much darker and added this base color to mimic genuine terracotta. As you will see shortly, I am going to layer the burnt umber on top. I dabbed this spot with a damp paper towel so that the base color could peek through. I then added this lighter brown espresso to give more dimension. I splattered on some white paint with a toothbrush to give a more worn and authentic look, and I also painted on a couple of dots as well. I blended those dots out with the espresso color. On the left side of this jar, sold at Amber Interiors, you can see a beautiful worn texture. I love that look, so I added a similar texture to mine with joint compound, smearing it near the rim. You can have fun and apply this wherever you'd like. As that was drying, I sanded some areas down so that the orange could peek through a bit. I then took it outside and spray painted it with this glaze spray paint. Since the joint compound was still wet, I avoided applying the spray paint in that area. I also avoided spraying the glaze on the joint compound because I did want to keep it its original matte finish for the final look. The next day, after everything was completely dry, I used the colors khaki, raw sienna, tanned, and the burnt umber colors. I combined and blended those on top of the joint compound. This vase is such a statement piece on our fireplace mantle. This corner in our bathroom was a bit bare, so I ended up placing it here, and I absolutely love it. Next, I am going to DIY the smaller black vase. I'm going to keep this one fairly simple compared to the large one. For this vase, I am going to use burnt sienna and light avocado. To achieve the blend of colors that I love for this vase, I used about half and half of each color. I also decided to add a few drops of black to darken it just a bit. This color turned out beautifully. I painted the entire vase in this color. This color is so yummy. Next, I am going to add raw sienna and khaki to the vase to add variation in color. First, I watered down raw sienna and applied it sporadically. I then used that brown and green mixture from the base to blend out the colors. This looks white, but it's actually watered down khaki. Again, I am blending in the base color on top to make this look more authentic. Once that was completely dry, I sealed it with the same glaze spray paint as the first one. The next DIY that I created is a ribbed papier-mâché bowl. I love papier-mâché bowls because they are lightweight and add an organic aesthetic. They look great as a standalone piece or can be paired with delicate flowers or bowl fillers. Some designs are pretty simple and others have unique designs that I am really drawn to. For this DIY, I used 2 plastic bowls from Dollar Tree, this roll of paper that I already had, glue from Dollar Tree, joint compound, popcorn sealing patch, saran wrap, and gloves. The first thing I did was to boil hot water. I will be using this to soften the paper since it is a little bit on the thicker side. I already had this roll of paper on hand, but you can use whatever paper you'd like. Newspaper, packing paper, notebook paper, anything. I unrolled a lot of paper and cut it into small pieces. Since I needed to soften the paper first, I placed it in a bowl that could withstand the hot water from the kettle. I ended up cutting more pieces of paper and placed that inside of the bowl. I let that sit for a couple of hours. This is the consistency that you're looking for. I then squeezed as much of the water out of the paper and placed it into the plastic bowl. To create the papier-mâché, I added the glue and then the popcorn sealing mixture. The popcorn sealing mixture is a step that you can completely skip. This is not necessary at all. I just used it because I had it on hand and it dries similarly to the joint compound. Once that was all mixed together, I added the joint compound to make this papier-mâché bowl as sturdy as possible. I used the second plastic bowl to mold the paper mache into the shape that I wanted. I wrapped yarn around the top of the bowl and secured it with tape. This created a guide so that I would know exactly where to stop when applying the paper mache mixture so that the top of the bowl would be even. I wrapped all of it in saran wrap so that once the bowl dried, I could easily remove it. Then finally, I applied the mixture all over. A base is optional. I did decide to add one to this bowl. I really love paper mache bowls that have designs, so I decided to add some indents all around to create a ribbed effect. So the drying process for this took way longer than I expected. The outside dried after an entire week. I removed the plastic bowl and unfortunately it did tear because the inside even after a week was still wet. To repair the areas that tore, I just applied joint compound. Once that was completely dry after another week, I sanded everything to even out the edges and to smooth out the sides. For a more organic look, you can leave the bowl as is, but because I did add those patches of joint compound on the torn parts, I will be adding paint to add dimension and color. The paint colors that I will be using are suede, tan, and espresso. For the base color, I use suede since it is a much lighter color. To add natural layers of color, I dabbed on the tan and then put the base color back on top and kept doing that over and over again. I added a bit of brown for a little peekaboo effect and covered that with the tan and suede colors. At the end, I also added a bit of white to bring out those colors. I first styled it stacked with another bowl that I already had. Since it's summertime, I am using this as a fruit bowl and placed our lemons on the inside. Next, I am going to DIY a beautiful wall art piece. I got inspiration for this from a piece that I saw on the June Loloy website. It is called Endless Threads. I love the earthy, organic, and soothing palette of this piece. It is $300 though, so I thought why not just DIY it instead. For the frame, I went thrifting and found this square one just for a few dollars. It matches the shape of the original perfectly. For this project, you will need 3 packs of jute rope. I got mine from the dollar store, clear drying glue. I use wood glue since I already had it on hand, a glue gun with glue sticks, a staple gun, measuring tape, scissors, and canvas fabric or painter's drop cloth. Either one will work. I started off by separating the rope. The rope is twisted together using 3 different strands, so I am separating them to achieve the organic look similar to the original. Each end of the rope is secured with tape, so I cut off one end of the tape for now to separate the pieces, then I began unraveling. When I got to the other end, I left the tape on. We will take that off later. Now that the rope is unraveled, I placed it all in the sink and soaked it in hot water. I'm doing this because I need the strands to be straight, so soaking it in hot water will remove the waves that the twist in the rope created. This happened pretty quickly. It only needed to soak for a couple of minutes. Then I placed it outside to completely dry. While that was drying, I began preparing the frame. The canvas was stapled to the wood, so I just removed all of the staples. I did have a staple remover, but you can just use a knife. Now I'm using the frame as a guide to see how much fabric I need to cut. I left some room to wrap the fabric around the edge. I decided to iron out all of the creases and wrinkles so that I had a smooth surface all the way around. I then cut and stapled the fabric, pulling it taut so that the fabric is as flat as possible. As you can see in the original, the rope design is about 2 to 3 inches from the edge, so I'm using my measuring tape to draw a 3-inch border from the edge. So now that this is completely dry, I can begin. This particular day was extremely hot, so it only took a few hours to completely dry. Now this is when I'm going to remove the tape that was left on the other end, because I am now going to completely separate all of the strands. If I had removed both ends of the tape earlier, it would have tangled really badly. I am using the hot glue gun to secure the ends. I folded the tip so that the frayed edges aren't visible. I am using the hot glue gun to give the rope an instant hold since it dries in seconds, and I'm using normal glue to give it a more secure, long-lasting hold, especially since we are attaching it to fabric which is breathable and more flexible. For this entire piece, I created this wave-like design, making sure that it stayed within the 3-inch border that I drew. When I got to the end of the piece, I curled the end to make sure that the pattern was uniform throughout, and I glued another piece tucking in the edges to blend it into the existing jute fabric. Creating this design with the rope only took about 45 minutes. I had most of the items on hand already, like the wood glue, fabric, and staple gun. I only had to purchase the canvas art, glue sticks for the glue gun, and the jute rope. That all totaled $15. This was such a great savings compared to $300 of the original art piece. Lastly, I am going to create a scalloped wooden stool. I purchased this stool from the thrift store and love the shape and height, but I knew that I wanted to update it a bit to match my style. Scallop details are trending in home decor and fashion right now. I don't typically follow trends, but this one I am totally on board. These scallop stools definitely inspired the upgrades that I made to mine. This one in particular is one that I especially love. This stool is dirty and the white distressed paint is more suitable for a cottagecore style. So the first thing that I did was I stripped the paint. Since it is extremely hot here in New York City, I wrapped the stool in saran wrap so that the stripping solution would not dry out. After about 30 minutes, I scraped the paint off. To remove all of the excess goo, I hosed down the stool and gave it a good old scrub with a cleaning brush and soap. When I scrubbed everything off, I discovered that the seat was actually plywood and not the same wood as the legs. I let that dry overnight. Since I wanted to add a scallop detail similar to this bench, I purchased this decorative wood trim from Amazon. These can be used for a variety of projects. You can use them to add details for furniture, you can use them to jazz up your entryway, and they are great for crafting projects as well. I'll leave the link for these below if you are interested in purchasing them. When they arrived, I was very happy with the quality, and the scalloped edges lined up perfectly to the corners of the stool for me to cut each piece. Or so I thought. More on that later. I began by cutting each piece with an X-Acto knife and a pair of scissors. You actually do not need an X-Acto knife for this. The wood is thin enough for scissors, but I did not realize that at the beginning. So when I was done cutting, I held up each piece and discovered that the octagon shape was not evenly cut. There were two separate lengths. One was long enough to fit a piece with 3 scallops and the other was long enough for 2.5 scallops. To fix this and keep the scalloped edge consistent all around, I had to cut each piece to match the length on each side. There was an adhesive on the back which seemed strong, but because I wanted the scalloped piece to adhere directly to the stool, I removed it. I then used wood glue and attached each piece. I let that dry overnight, then used wood filler to fill in all of the gaps around the seat and where the scalloped edges met. A couple of legs were separating, so I also glued and hammered that back together. A few hours later, I sanded the wood filler to make all of the edges seamless and neat. Because the seat was plywood, the legs were natural wood, and there was quite a bit of wood filler, I chose antiquing wax instead of stain. Wax does not soak in like stain does, so it helps to create a more uniform finish across the different materials. I love the wood grain on the legs, so after I applied each layer of wax, I wiped off any excess with a piece of old cotton t-shirt so that the natural wood grain would still be visible. I applied it all over, repeating this process after each layer of wax. I let each layer of wax dry for about 30 minutes before applying the next layer. In total, I applied 4 layers to the legs and the seat, and because the scalloped wood pieces were much lighter in color, I had to apply 7 layers. But in the end, you can't tell. Everything blends together seamlessly, and I love the wood tone. It does take the wax about 11 days to fully cure, so after a couple of weeks, I'm going to apply this top coat to protect the finish. I styled it with this beautiful vase that I recently thrifted and a candle. I hope that you enjoyed all of the DIYs that I shared with you. Let me know in the comments below which one is your favorite. I also quickly just wanted to say I am so sorry. I know that I have been posting my videos pretty sporadically and they have not been every week. It is the summertime and our baby girl, who is no longer a baby girl, she is a toddler now. She will be starting school for the first time in September. So I'm really trying to soak up all of these summer moments with her, and we have been having a lot of fun. So my goal is to post a video every other week, and if I am able to, I will sprinkle in a video in between there. So thank you so much for watching my videos. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. I will see you in the next video. Bye.